And sometimes it's been like they're starting to tell us what they're seeing or hearing, but they never actually get it out. And so it's like everybody else's job to just let the mystery exist. There was one death that I was at where like it stands out as being so unique, and the only real difference was that one person set an intention. We're all here to see this person transition peacefully and surrounded by love. Like that was it. And it was so beautiful. Yes, death is hard and life is hard.
Welcome back to the Tim Teaches podcast. I'm your host, Tim McCoy. Today I'm joined by Alyssa Rose, a grief guide, death doula, and recent TEDx speaker. She helps people transform loss into healing through somatic work, ceremony, and spiritual guidance. We'll explore how grief can be a sacred teacher and how rituals and community can support deep emotional healing. Alyssa, welcome to Tim Teaches. Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm excited to be here.
Reaching out. I just watched your TEDx speech. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
How'd you get linked up with TEDx?
I had just reached out. I was interested in sharing more about this and being more in the conversation around death, dying, and grieving. And so, yeah, got connected and went down to California for it.
How was that process? Was it scary for you? Exciting? Have you done any public speaking like that before?
I had not done anything like that before, and it's completely memorized.
Yeah.
So that was also a different skill.
That's awesome. I've always thought about it, but I will probably never get on the TEDx stage. I don't think so. It's a different animal.
It's so different.
Yeah, recording and then being able to edit a podcast or something. I'm like, unless I put it out, nobody's ever going to see this, so I don't have to worry about it. But live is a different thing. So.
It is, and it's so different to like. I love having a conversation like this.
Yeah.
Which is very different than like, let me tell you about a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are a death doula, which I don't know anything about it. So if you could just kind of introduce yourself a little bit, where are you from, and how'd you get into this work, and what the heck is a death doula?
Yeah, thanks. I'm from Michigan, Midwest, and I now live in Portland, Oregon, and I work with people all over. I do a lot of remote work and Portland-based work, but I work as a death doula and a grief guide. And the death doula role is similar to a birth doula in that you're an advocate for the dying person and their family, but you really get to help walk with them through the dying process. It really depends. People hire death doulas at all different stages of the dying process, and different doulas do all different kinds of things. Like I personally do less of the estate planning and wills and things like that. I do a lot more of the kind of spiritual care and care of the body and tending and ritual. And so it is a huge range of what that could look like. I kind of got into this work because I grew up in a house with medicine. My dad was a doctor, and so I was always really interested in working with the human body and humans. But I did not want to do medicine the way I saw it being done, and like the way that medical school functions, and the way I wasn't sure I could really go down that path in that way. So instead, I went to art school, and I went down a very different windy path. But I found my way back to wanting to work with humans and work with the body, and so I went back to school here in Portland at East West to do massage, hospice massage specifically. And I started volunteering with a local hospice, and I was volunteering here with medical aid in dying. And I was in school for massage and came out jumping into that more full-time hospice massage. And it was really like at the bedside of dying people, and then also very involved in my grandmother's death and dying, that I started to really see how bad we are with grief. Mm-hmm. And it really piqued my interest in grief. And I went down kind of a personal study, deep dive, trying to understand like, how did we get here? Why are we like this with grief? And it was kind of alarming to just feel like, wow, okay, the dying person's quality of care and connection is directly limited or expanded by their loved one's ability to be with what's actually happening and to be able to accept and to be able to like sit with the range of experiences and emotions that come with grieving. So from kind of this death focused work, I started to explore grief and I started to discover that grief is so much bigger than death related. It touches so many parts of our lives, and it's really more connected to change than death, in my opinion. Yes, deaths definitely, but also all different forms of change. And it's much more present and future based than we sometimes think. So then I really started this work with grief, one-to-one grief work, but also grief ritual work in community and somatic grief work. Like, how does this show up in the body? How do we tend to the body? So that's kind of the world in which I now play and work.
Are you normally working, the people are that you're seeing are obviously moving on. Are you mainly dealing with the families, or are you interacting with the dying person, or are they usually past the point of communicating? I know that's a long process for some people and a very short process for others.
Yes. And doulas get called in at all different pieces of that stage as well. So I'm generally working with both. I'm generally working with the person who is dying as present in this world as they may be. So sometimes that is very involved and very like we're communicating and planning and sometimes to your point, I'm working more with the family and they are less responsive and I'm working to support both. And then ideally continuing the work beyond the death. So continuing the work with the family beyond the actual death into the spaces of grief.
Hmm. I'm very curious about death, just in the sense of I don't feel like we're dying. We're just transitioning into another chapter in our existence. What are kind of some of the things that you see? I know a lot of people, and this might be a little bit off topic, but I'm kind of an off topic dude. Like, do you? I know, like when my wife's grandmother died, about 24 hours before, she started seeing and talking to loved ones that were not there. Do you see that often?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That has been, I would say it has been common. I don't know about scale, but that is definitely something that has been common and that I have witnessed. It's really, really interesting. And sometimes it's been like they're starting to tell us what they're seeing
Yeah.
or hearing, but they never actually get it out. And so it's like everybody else's job to just let the mystery exist.
Yeah. No, I find it so fascinating because I mean, even during like the latest death that I was a part of with my wife's grandmother, she was looking off into the corner and like, what's he doing here? Like nobody's here, but somebody showed up to help her out. She wasn't pleased to see him. But it's
So interesting.
death is a very interesting it's part of life. But what, I mean, is there kind of a common theme with people who are in that transitioning space or dying space? If you're able to talk to them, do they talk to you about their life and regrets or things that they're happy that they did? And what's kind of a common theme that
Hmm.
you see?
It varies so significantly, like especially if I'm talking to younger people more in the like recently retired or anticipating retirement coming. Um, in those spaces, there can be a lot more storytelling about life and regret and like what does this all mean? But there can also be a big presence of fear around not wanting to become a burden.
Uh-huh.
That's like one of the main, like the biggest kind of fears I hear. I'm not wanting to become a burden for a family. And so that's kind of like one category. There have been situations where like really near the end, people are telling stories and they have loved ones surrounding them and they are able to to share deeply in a really intimate and beautiful way. Though I wouldn't say that that is the most common. There's also a lot in between where it's not that type of conversation, or there can be so much discomfort that we are kind of anxious and fidgety and just talking about the weather and the news because we don't really know how to be there together, or we haven't necessarily seen that or seen how to, or really felt into how do we show up to each other through this? How do we do dying together?
Yeah, it's a rough one, and it's a conversation that's hard to have even with people who are living and maybe they're not dying, but they're getting older. And it's like, how do you have those conversations ahead of time so that, because a lot of times where nobody wants to talk about it. You don't want to talk about your death. You don't want to talk about what's going to happen to mom when dad's gone, to even bring up the subject is taboo. And how do you bring those conversations to life with people and make it a comfortable situation?
Yes, really good question. And the number one thing I would say is if you don't want to be a burden to your family, talking about what your wishes are is the number one way to work on that fear and anxiety and to shift away from what could become something that could potentially tear apart a family, right? So often there can be this tearing apart that happens when the wishes of the person are unclear. When some of the kids think that they would want this and the other kids think that they would want this, and it's not written, it's not clear. So as much as you, as the person who's thinking about your own aging and dying, can get clear about what you want and can communicate that with your people and let everybody know and keep everyone updated as that changes, it's going to be such a gift to the people that love you, versus sometimes the avoidance of it can leave a lot in the dark. And so then we're all guessing. And though everyone's trying to guess with your best interest in mind, without your voice in it and without your opinion there, it can be really challenging. So it is a hard conversation. And I don't think that the goal is for it to be comfortable, actually. That brings me into the question of how do we do discomfort together? How can we be in connection when there's conflict and when there's uncertainty and when when we are all leaning in because of love to do this uncomfortable thing together because of a shared value and a shared depth of care for this person and for the family. So I think maybe approaching it in the space of this is uncomfortable and we might all hate it. And we hate that this is a reality, but we acknowledge that it is, and we want to keep connecting our relationships deeper to help hold us when things get harder later. How can we, from a resource position now, learn and ask, what do we individually need when we're grieving? If I'm working with my siblings and we're thinking about a parent aging and dying, I know for me, I want X, Y, or Z kinds of things to help me regulate and help me in my grieving process. But my twin sister might want completely opposite things, which is likely and true. So those kinds of things, what can we do when we're resourced now and when things are good or stable in some way now that prepare us into the future?
Mm-hmm. And you're working with as a death doula, you're not necessarily working with people probably who just keel over and die. They're in hospice. You're coming into their home and dealing with people. Do you work with anybody in a traumatic setting where it's not expected and now you're just kind of dealing with the family? You're not necessarily dealing with the person who passed.
Yes. And actually my work primarily actually is grief work. I do a lot of death doula work, but even more grief work. And so though people call me because their mom died or someone died and they're wanting to tend to that grief, that death and that grief always has threads into other things that have maybe been living untended in them. And so it expands out. And there have been a lot of clients I work with where there is a big traumatic death, a big, huge, surprising thing. And so then I work with them through navigating grief, and that's really interesting and really unique to people, based on their relationship with the person that died or with the loss. This could be, I just got a diagnosis,
Mhm.
or partners breaking up, right? Or losing a job, or whatever it could be, is like, oh my gosh, like everything I thought that I was going to have, this future I thought that I was going to have with this person, or this family I thought I was going to have, no longer is. And how do I reckon with the fact that I still want that and I don't get to have it? And how do I like move forward? How do I integrate that loss into my life? How do I keep living in a way that brings my love and longing with me? It isn't it isn't like I get done grieving
Yeah.
and that person, is no longer in my life. To your point earlier about what happens when we die, I really think it's a change of form
Mhm.
as well. Like our relationship changes form, and the person may no longer be embodied, but I still believe we're in community, and we're still in, like, I still love them. We still have love. We just have to we have to communicate it differently. We have to feel each other differently. We have to engage differently than we did when we were both in human bodies.
Do you think that that communication, I mean, I believe it's real, and I believe that your loved ones, though they're gone, you can still have those kind of weird communications, and people will say it's woo, and it sounds woo, and it probably is a little woo, but I believe it.
Totally.
You kind of found me on Instagram, and I think, are you affiliated, or do you know about the Psychedelic Society up there?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, I think that's how we kind of
Yeah.
found each other. Have you had any experiences with that? I would assume so.
Yeah.
Is
Um, well, and there's two things. One, first of all, to your point of like that communication happening, it's so common for me in my work with clients that
Mhm.
that a person dies and they're like, well, now I see them. Now I know they're with me every time I see a blue dragonfly.
Yeah.
Now I know they're with me when I see this bird or when I walk in this place. And so it can look really different in terms of level of woo.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I've seen that be true for many people, and
Yeah.
to offer deep solace. Not that it removes the grief and the
For sure.
sadness, but it actually slows us down to be like, oh wait, I can connect with them here.
Yeah.
I can connect with them in these different ways. And then yes, in terms of the psychedelic world and psychedelics in that space, both to reduce anxiety around death and for supporting people through navigating grief as well. I have seen that kind of be a really beautiful medicine for people.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I've done that for some grief on my own, but at the same time, um, just to jump into a little bit different topic, like on some of those experiences, I've run into some loved ones, and communicated with them and got some freaking answers that were, to questions that, you know, it definitely makes you go, oh, they're definitely not gone. I mean, they're, and I don't think it's just your mind playing tricks on you. There's a whole lot more going on out there than people realize. But being surrounded by death constantly, um, how do you deal with that, just as a human?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a few ways. Like for me, I'm so grateful now to live on some land. I live in Portland, but on 7 acres, and so there's so much more, so much of a deeper relationship with the land and the cycles that are natural when we engage in the natural world and with the lives of the animals and the trees and the seasons. So that, like, I'm always going back to nature and specifically also to the ocean. I'm always like going to the ocean and to the mountain. We see it so much in nature. But honestly, like I'm always kind of surprised and amazed because I work with people who have gone through some of the hardest, scariest things, like some of my deepest fears, greatest fears. I end up in a room with someone who's gone through that. And when I hear people's stories, it's just like it's wild in both the feeling of like, how could this happen? How could people do this to other people on one side, but also like, holy cow, so much resilience and strength and beauty and willingness to heal and to willingness to grow in compassion and for reconciliation and all of these things is the other like bigger, louder thing that I experience in being with both dying and grieving. So I do walk away being like, people are incredible. I am so amazed and in awe. And also with dying, though there are many times that feel like, I wish this could be different for someone. And more than that, I see what feel like really beautiful deaths. Like really, and those ones are the ones that really stand out of like the family is surrounding their person. It's beautiful. There's flowers or there's music. Or honestly, there was one death that I was at where like it stands out as being so unique. And the only real difference was that one person set an intention. One person was like, let's get in a circle. Like, let's just like all be together for a second. We're all here to see this person transition peacefully and surrounded by love. Like that was it. And it was so beautiful because of that.
Oh, that is like incredible. And I wish everybody could have a beautiful death, you know. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, but I mean, I wouldn't call those people lucky, but being able to go out with your family and your friends surrounding you. I mean, that's the grand finale of life, you know. It's like you're surrounded by those loved ones, and you know, we can't all plan for our death because we don't know when that's coming. But if you can, it sure would be nice to be surrounded by those you love, you know, and those that love you. Um, how do you you know, how do you approach somebody who's dealing with the fear and the grief? Like, what's kind of the initial process for you meeting with somebody? Do you just sit down and hear their story and then just work from there, or do you kind of have a playbook?
Yeah, it's very custom for me. It's very custom just because they come in at all different stages and all different, like some people don't have any diagnosis, but they're starting to think and plan. And some people are, could die in the next few days. And the family's willingness and readiness to talk about things and the person as well. So it's definitely more of connecting and then, yeah, sharing a person's story, understanding where I can support, understanding like what are the current challenges, what are the goals, like what are they really wanting to feel and for this to be experienced as like, is there legacy work to do? Are there legacy projects that are wanting to be done? Are there stories that are needing channels to be released through and told through? Where is the anxiety and fear? Like, and a lot of times there's a lot of logistics of like, okay, a family wants to use recompose right up in Washington and have the body turned into soil, or they want to do a water cremation, or they like just even figuring out getting the hospice to talk to the other place, and if you need to drive across state and all of the legal paperwork kinds of things. But I'm doing a lot of like emotional support and like being on call because sometimes your person might be on hospice, but hospice may not be on the ground with you all of the time, right? So then they might be calling me in the middle of the night when there's like a feeling like a medical crisis, and they've already called hospice, but I can at least be emotional support and be present with them through things like that. And then also the like, okay, now my person has died. Now I have to pack up their home. Now I have to like think about selling some of their things and what do I want to bring with me. And um, so I'm with people through the death and much beyond. Yeah, and very very inspired by the different approaches to grief. And then grief itself shows up so differently. And I just really want people to like have grace with themselves and with each other through grief because we're really kind of quick to pathologize and to be like, my grief's not big enough, or mine's not bad because I'm grieving an animal and someone else is grieving a child. And we do a competitive thing. And we also do I think I'm going backwards because I'm still feeling X, Y, or Z thing. And I just like, there's no real going backwards, right? It's all over the place. It just is. And it's going to be, and it is out of control, and it is going to feel bad. And most people come and they're like, I want to do grief better. I want to feel less out of control. And like, you're doing it right if you feel out of control, you know.
Yeah, man. And a lot of people, some people have never lost anybody in their life, but they have lost a pet, and that's horrific to them. And the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And you can't, everybody has their worst day, and so you should definitely respect those people who are grieving the loss of an animal. That's like a loved one to them,
Yeah.
I have my dad has a friend who's currently been told by his doctor that he needs to call hospice and go through that process, and he has no family, has nobody, and he's basically refusing to do that. I don't know, how to help a guy like that. He lives down the road from me, and I'm like, should I go by there and talk to this person?
Yeah.
What in situations like that, somebody's all alone, has no family. Do you ever work with people like that?
I have, let's see, I haven't as a deaf doula directly as much. I think kind of tangentially and with medical aid and dying, sometimes people are kind of on their own or their family doesn't support the decision. And so working with individuals that way. But it's like what you're describing is very familiar. I grew up in a Midwestern family and we do not talk about feelings. And there's can be such an association with hospice of like, I'm not dying, or I don't want to do that, or I'm not. There's some stuff there for sure with a lot of people. And so though hospice is, I think, so great, like hospice is so focused on comfort and the whole person and care in that way, people can definitely think it means I'm dying and I'm not dying. Or
Yeah.
so I mean, I'm really curious about where people are at with it. I would say yes to go talking to him with no agenda,
Yeah.
but just curiosity of like what his world is like, what his moment is like. Because I
Yeah,
think
I think
Mhm.
so many people out there, it's unfortunate, but there are a lot of people out there who don't have anybody, no family, no friends, and maybe they've lived their entire life and they are dying, and now it's come down to them in a bed by themselves with nobody around them. And I imagine that's got to be very scary for somebody. And I'm going to throw in a bunch of keywords into this, and there might be somebody watching this episode out there right now who's on death's door, and not to put you on the spot, but if somebody is listening out there, what would you kind of recommend for that person to get themselves into the right mind frame of what's happening?
Mhm. Such a good question. And I agree. I actually think it is common. Um, and it can leave someone with like very both overwhelmed and very isolated, right? So I am always feeling towards connection. Like if there's someone that walks by your house every day, if you see the mailman, if you whatever it might be, like having small, nice interactions with people, if you are alone in this. And so like this kind of like reach out a little bit just for some human connection and care and exchange of care and exchange of like hello and I see you and you mean like we're characters in each other's world, like that alone, even if we don't know each other deeply, or maybe leaning in where one might be able to, even if it's someone that they know online or that they can call. I think the human connection and the telling our stories and being heard, being witnessed. If you have a few people in your life, even one person in your life, and you could call them and say, "Hey, do you have 10 minutes? Can I just share with you what my moment is like?" And you just listen. I actually don't need anything from you at all. I don't need solutions. I'm fine. But could you just listen? Or, hey, could you call me once a week and just ask me about X, Y, Z? It could be ask me about my dog, or ask me about my cancer, or ask me about, or don't ask me about X, Y, or Z thing. But I think some of the little human connections, and then as well as we approach death, we are embodied now, which means we have these senses that we get to engage in the world with. And so thinking about like the sensual world, like what do I love to eat? What do I love to listen to? Like, can I cue in a little bit more to the sound of the birds in the morning? Because that is something that feels good and makes me feel alive. And when we become unembodied, then we can't experience pleasure in those same ways through these senses in the body, right?
Yeah, we're all here having the human experience. So while you have that time, you should take advantage of it, go outside, look at the stars, or look at the trees or the birds or everything. It's amazing. And don't wear any shoes. Ground yourself, honestly. But I mean, if there's somebody out there watching this, and I only have so much advice, and it may be good advice, maybe bad, but I would say, like, if you're facing death and you're by yourself, I guarantee you there's somebody in your life out there that would be willing to talk to you, and it's probably been waiting for a phone call or a connection from you for a very long time. And just because of your life and your past and anything that's happened, everybody's made mistakes out there. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call somebody and tell them, listen, I'm sorry about the past, or I forgive you for what you've done to me, but I'm at the end of my road, and I want to go out with a connection to the people that I knew and loved, because everybody has somebody out there. Almost everybody, maybe not everybody, but most people have somebody out there that they can call, whether they're willing to or not. That's
Mm-hmm.
another story. But I would recommend giving it a shot, because what's it going to hurt? You're
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing I'm thinking of too, as we're talking about this, is I feel like the act of storytelling and telling our story and retelling our story and how we tell our story is really important. And so another thing to explore would be just for anyone who's aging or approaching death or thinking about these things, is doing kind of a life review, writing our story, and like paying attention to how you write your story. Do you define your life based on the jobs you had, or the partners you had, or negative things that happened in your life, or positive things, or beautiful things, or um because you get to be the narrator ultimately. And so like that can be done over and over and over, of writing the story, reading it, being like, wow, I'm really highlighting these moments of trauma and abandonment and like all of these things. Okay, what's another lens I could use to look at my life? Like, and that can also help pull out and help us remember different pieces. Like, what are things that I love that I did? What are things uh, that I can celebrate
Yes.
in the life?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been doing a lot more like meditation lately. And a lot of times when I'm doing it, like, I don't actually know what I'm doing when I'm meditating. I'm just trying to, they said, just don't think about it. Just clear your mind. But these little snippets of my life always flash, stuff that you never think about for 20, 30 years, all these little good moments in your life, or not so good, but being able to lay in that stillness and really just kind of think about all the different things that you've been able to experience in your life. And we are having this human experience, and we're not here forever. forever. We're here for a short amount of time, and all those little things like, some people say, oh, we kind of plan our lives before we come down here and we have this
Mm-hmm.
experience. And, I kind of believe that, I believe in free will and everything, but I do believe that people are brought in and out of our circle, our life, for a reason. And we're kind of in school down here,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and,
Totally.
so don't, death is hard. Death is really hard, but it's not the end of the road, I don't believe, And
Mm.
do you have, what's kind of your afterlife spirituality thought? Do you have one? Or
Mm.
are you willing to share it?
Well, before I consider sharing it, to your point around death being hard, like death again as one piece of it, but there's so many other losses and form changes and separations that happen in our lives. Like even, getting a diagnosis. We're living with something every day, and death could still be 30 years away. But there's a huge loss in the dream of what I thought my life was going to look like. Or we lose a partner, whether we break up or there's a death or an affair or whatever it might be. And again, this like dream of the world that I thought we were living in and towards it is gone.
Mhm.
Um, and so there's so much grief associated with these kinds of things, as well as the collective sorrows of the world. Like, how do we let our hearts break for what is happening outside of our personal lives, while also figuring out how to function and live and tend to our personal world. Um, so yes, death is hard and life is hard. And how do we, a teacher of mine, someone I lean on a lot in this work, Frances Weller, speaks about like, it's the mature person's job, if you will, to be stretched large, stretched wide by love and grief, or by praise and loss, right? By these extreme emotions. Like, and if we don't ever let our hearts actually break or actually feel how heartbreaking it is to exist in this world, um, then we're also limiting our capacity to love over here. And there's like almost an irresponsibility. There's almost an avoidance, or there's almost like something that's really lost by not letting ourselves feel the impact. And I do think that through feeling the impact and through feeling all the way through our sorrow and all of the other emotions that show up, um, that like from there, like after that, we can begin to just keep understanding our values, keep understanding what's important to us, keep get really clear on what action makes sense to take, like what causes am I going to pour into? What are the most important things for me to give my life to protecting and cultivating? As well as when we go there, often down in the darkness is where a different type of connection can happen, both with our human family, but also with our non-human family, whether it be nature or ancestors or spirit. When we need help, when we really surrender and we get out of our way and we recognize that we can't do it alone and we're not supposed to do it alone, there's such a depth of belonging available from that place. And I hate to talk about like the benefits of grieving because I don't want to create a culture that's like, I do this so that I get the other thing. I go to yoga so that I can be fit. I do grief ritual so I can be clear on my purpose.
Yeah.
So I hesitate to talk about it in that way at all. But I do think that there's a really important piece for us tending to our grief individually, but also collectively.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious. So I have a friend who was diagnosed with like stage 4 cancer and basically given 6 months to live, young guy, military veteran. And I mean, we could talk about how this process went, but I mean, he's lived with this diagnosis for the last year and a half, 2 years, and now he had surgery down at Stanford for a brain tumor, and it had spread all over his body. He tried some immunotherapy, and we may have put him on some other alternative stuff, and now he is cancer free, which is amazing. But he went through this whole thought process for 6 months, a year, year and a half, that he's going to be dead, and he's not even just turned 40 years old and has a kid. Do you deal with, do you help people, or have you ever had to help somebody who's gone through the process of, oh, I'm going to die, and now I'm not, and now I'm going to keep living? Like, that's got to be jarring for somebody. Positive, yes, but I mean, just traumatic as hell.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. And that's amazing to hear that he's cancer free. I think I've worked with people in different ways around this, of like, they went into hospice and then they started thriving actually and got kicked off hospice, and it happened like 4 or 5 times. That actually does happen, where like suddenly they're getting this very holistic care that is based on comfort, and then they sometimes start to thrive, and they're like, you're out of here. You're back in the living. Like, yeah, it's
Call us.
yeah, totally. But I think what you're describing is such a lesson actually of life and death, right? The uncertainty of it and our expectation of what's going to happen, and like just constantly having to shed that we don't know. It's out of our hands. How do I show up to life? How do I choose to love and to live every day as all of that stuff changes, as I have 6 months to live, as actually now I'm cancer free, as I'm like deep in treatment and this is hard, and like all of those different things coming back to this choice. How do I choose to love? How do I choose to live today with everything as it is? Um, yeah. So some of these really good questions you're asking me, I am not answering directly. I am like,
That's
okay. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. I get it. I mean, I don't have all the answers, and I don't expect you to tell me everything you know, because you got to save some of this for your people. If they learn all your secrets, they may not call you. How do people get a hold of you normally?
Yeah, my website is alyssarosehealingarts.com. I also post a lot on Instagram. You can find me there, Alyssa Rose Healing. And I'm writing on Substack too. You can find it all on my website.
Right on. What am I missing? I know you could probably talk about this for a very long time, but
It's true.
I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate having the conversation. I think that the more work we can do in our lives to get comfortable with uncertainty and to like hold this tension of the beauty and the horror and the love and the sorrows of the world, instead of like closing away from one or bypassing or anything, just like, can we get comfortable in the uncertainty? Can we get comfortable in the fact that we don't have control and we don't know? All of that, I think, really serves us as we age, as we die, as we also then tend to ourselves in grief and to each other in grief.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, and thank you so much for doing the hard work, because you are helping people, in that moving on process, the dying process and grief. And that's a hard job. And I commend you for stepping up and helping people. Like, that's not an easy thing. And, you should be proud of the work you're doing. And I thank you for taking the time to share your experience. And if you people out there listening, if you've got any value out of this, I hope you share it and reach out. And we'll keep plugging away. You keep plugging away, Alyssa. And thank you
Great.
very much.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.